What makes Project Zomboid so easy to play for hours and hours on end is how it allows for a multitude of experiences. Whether that takes the form of experiencing the day of the outbreak with the help of mods that bring in non-playable characters, testing your abilities by placing your character in a challenge scenario like spawning on a skyscraper, or dropping into the apocalypse years after the collapse of society to really push your knowledge of crafting and survival skills. Today though, I'm going to talk about the release of Build 42, several of its new features, and how they are clearly tailoring towards one particular type of experience that I am incredibly excited to jump back into. This is Wilderness Survival in Project Zomboid, and why it's about to be one of the best ways to play. Now, before I get ahead of myself here, let's introduce the concept. If you're a long-time viewer of the channel, you might have seen me talking about this setup over a year ago now, during Build 41, but if you're not familiar, Wilderness Survival in Project Zomboid basically drops your character into the middle of a forest with no weapons, no clothes, and no supplies to get you started. Thanks to the wonders of the Steam Workshop and the modding community, this was aided by a plethora of mods that brought in extra crafting recipes for important items that you wouldn't be able to find otherwise, such as wooden nails for construction, carved wooden bowls for boiling water, and even primitive clothing to keep your character sheltered from the elements. Now, there are zombies in this setup, but the emphasis is on surviving against Mother Nature herself, and as such you'll see a lot less undead than your standard playthrough. The way this method of play tests your knowledge of the game and pushes that knowledge to the absolute limit makes for an incredible experience, and whether you love or hate the new major update, Build 42 is setting up to make this particular way to play even better. So let's dig into that next. Okay, so like I mentioned a minute ago, certain mods were necessary on Build 41 in order to make this kind of setup playable. Without it, you wouldn't be able to build rudimentary shelter or even put shoes on your feet to stop you from constantly opening wounds just from walking around. But here's the thing, over the last few updates for Build 42, we've seen various crafting recipes sneaking their way into the game. Ordinarily, these features would go unnoticed because, well, the chances are most players aren't going to need them in a standard playthrough. For example, as of the most recent patch, various clothing can now be crafted from items like animal hides, tarp, ripped pieces of cloth, and even garbage bags. If you read the patch notes yourself, you'd probably look at this kind of implementation and ask, why would I ever need to do that? Because you're able to get all the clothes you need relatively easily from houses, various stores, or even just from the zombies themselves. But if you're lost in the wilderness, all of a sudden this feature has a very real use and means one less mod to install. That's not the only features that have removed the need for a mod either, with things like improved flashlights and lanterns, twine shoes, and even iron crafted nails entering the mix. This is without mentioning crafted weapons, which has become a huge part of Build 42, as well as some existing items that are now usable as weapons also. Formerly with Wilderness Survival, the best option early on was to try and craft a makeshift knife using a mod and then make some spears. Now, on top of the myriad of crafted weapons available, we'll simply be able to pick up a large stone or a branch as our first weapon, and that's going to be invaluable for those crucial first experiences when trying out this setup. It's believable, and it makes things just a tad easier to get into rather than dying to your first few zombies because you haven't been able to craft a weapon within the first 20 or 30 minutes of gameplay. Before long, we aren't actually going to need any mods for this at all, aside from maybe a modded map to play on. Everything we need will be baked into the new crafting system, and that is a pretty big deal. One of the biggest challenges for playing Wilderness Survival setups on Build 41 was putting together a mod pack that covered all of the crafting you needed in order to survive. And even if you did manage to get all of those essential crafting recipes through mods, you'd end up with duplicates of the same crafts because more than one of those mods would attempt their rendition of them, creating a lot of confusion. It was genuinely a time-consuming task to put together the right mod pack for this, but in the not too distant future, we may not need any mods at all, and that will massively increase accessibility for players. Now, I know that the crafting overhaul that has come with Build 42 has definitely had its fair share of debate about whether it's actually a positive change or not, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the current state of crafting down in the comments section. But I was playing the other day on a 10 years later run, and it sort of occurred to me that I really haven't engaged with it much since the fresh UI was implemented. It's not that I'm not interested, it's just a bit overwhelming, really. I have no idea where to start. There's really no reason for me to do any crafting on account of looted item counterparts, and so I don't really feel the need to learn. This is why I think I'm particularly excited about the revival of wilderness survival play. In those kinds of settings, I have an actual reason to engage with the new system, and I have a very clear starting point based on my survival needs. Let me explain. You're dropped on a beach and straight away find that you need shoes to protect your feet from cuts. So I search for shoes, and there it is, twine shoes. Now I just need to find or craft twine, so I search for that too. Okay, now we're really onto something. I have my starting point and can begin foraging for the necessary materials to craft twine. I finally make my new shoes and, oh, what's this? My character is starting to get thirsty, but I need to purify any water before I can drink. So I need a campfire and a bowl which can be made with the carving skill and a knife of some kind, which I'll also need to build for myself. Anyway, you're probably starting to see what I mean here. I've got some clear direction and a very clear reason to engage with the crafting system to start to learn how things work. It may even serve to help people like myself who are still a bit uncertain about the new system to properly form their opinions and thoughts on it for some developer feedback that they can use to implement changes or improvements. In short, right now we have very little reason to use a lot of the new crafting system, and this may just give us the direction we need to change that. Just very quickly, while we're on the crafting system and before we move on to something else, I think I'd like to voice what I believe are a couple of really easy improvements. The first being to simply allow us to filter by recipes that we have the skill level for, or recipes we already know, which would make the number of crafts way less intimidating to look at. Second, allow us to right-click any item and see what crafts that item is used in, similar to a popular mod on Build 41 known as Craft Helper. This was an especially useful mod in wilderness survival settings because you naturally need to use crafting recipes a lot more. Lastly, show us the experience gain that we achieve for each craft. This would allow players to easily identify what they would need to make in order to level up their skills the fastest way possible. And that seems like a very easy implementation to make, at least with my very limited knowledge of game dev. Anyway, with that tangent successfully wrapped up, let's talk about one big element that's holding players back from diving into wilderness survival on Build 42 right now, and that's modded maps. You've probably noticed by now that many of your favorite maps from Build 41 haven't been updated yet. So why is that? Well, in short, modders don't have access to the tools necessary for updating their map mods just yet. There are some unofficial tools available, but they aren't going to be as good as the official ones, of course, and there is a risk that those modders will just have to do it again anyway when the official tools are released, so it makes little sense for them to update their creations right now. To explain this in a bit more depth, the main problem is that there is now what is known as a biome map with the implementation of Build 42, which helps define different variations of an environment. For example, you can have multiple different types of a forest. It's not just one singular forest biome anymore. You might have an organically grown deep forest biome, or by contrast, a man-made and maintained forest on farmland. The biome map defines what kind of vegetation spawns in that area, amongst other features, to help bring the appropriate look to the area. Crucially though, it also defines what foraging zones you're in. Now, manually defining a foraging zone was less than ideal for modders previously. They in essence had to draw where each foraging zone started and ended, which, as you can imagine, is quite time consuming, especially if you're dealing with a large map with multiple different zones. The idea with the biome system is that those zones can be implemented automatically. This will save an incredible amount of time for modders, but right now the process still has quite a complicated manual element to it. The developers are attempting not only to make this process entirely automated, but also to give map modders the opportunity to manually edit those zones once they've been assigned by the automated system. With everything else they're focusing on right now, with the development of Build 42, this is going to take some time. So right now it's just a waiting game until we see those tools added by the developers and modders can start revitalizing their creations. So we know the return of many of our favorite maps are on the way, but if you weren't quite excited enough about trying this kind of setup for yourself just yet, I might have something to push you off that fence that you're currently perched on. This is a map that I commissioned from Simon MD during build 41 and worked directly with him on some of the design elements and ideas for what you can expect to find when exploring the map for yourself. It's called Lost to Nature, and if the name didn't give you a hint enough already, it's entirely focused on survival in a world where Mother Nature has reclaimed what was once hers. While there are a few limited loot spawns available on the map, you'll find any and all buildings are dilapidated and overgrown. Certainly not ideal for shelter, and much of the loot spawns you'd expect from a standard building may not be present. Maybe you'll explore the lighthouse with the remains of a rusted ship long since grounded just offshore, or check out the abandoned mine that may offer shelter but can be a maze to those unfortunate enough to be wandering around in the dark. However you choose to play it, this map was something I was incredibly proud to say I was a part of, and was hands down the best experience I've had with wilderness survival on Project Zomboid. Pair this map with the appropriate mods and you can have a great time with it right now on build 41, but once it's been updated for build 42 with all of the new crafting systems in play, I think we'll be in for a match made in heaven. Now, something I've not talked about so far in this video is the improvements to the crafting system and related mechanics that we may need to see before wilderness survival is 100% playable without the use of mods. While the crafting system continues to see some positive updates as time goes on, there are a couple of elements that I haven't seen addressed just yet that I think could impact this setup in a massive way. First, and perhaps the biggest change I think that is needed, would be further options for zombie clothing. Now let me explain this one. We already have access to a bunch of crafted clothing which we can make to preserve our character's modesty and also better prepare themselves for the harsh weather, right? Well, if we can get better clothes from zombies like we can in the vanilla version of the game right now, why would we make those clothes at all? So, as a suggestion, I think we need to have a sandbox option that would allow us to change the zombie clothing so that it's effectively little to no use in terms of insulation properties. We actually had a feature added to Yaki's makeshift clothing mod back on build 41 for this, which just ensured that zombies spawned with tattered rags for clothes, so we were encouraged to craft. In fact, while we're talking about the sandbox options, an official preset might do a world of good for this kind of setup. Again, it's all about accessibility here. The less messing around the player has to go through with mods, or in this case sandbox settings, the better. Okay, I've talked a lot about build 42 in this video and why it's going to be so good for the wilderness survival setup, but what if you want to play it right now on build 41? Maybe you haven't had the chance to try it yet and this video has got you interested in giving it a go, or you knew about it before and just didn't really know where to start when it came to mods. After all, right now it's a pretty complex scenario which requires you to put together a range of mods to cover various different crafting milestones. One missed crafting recipe and your playthrough could be ruined. Luckily for you guys at home, we've done the hard work for you. Linked in the description of this video is a mod collection that you can download with one click and you'll be good to go. This includes the custom map we've referenced earlier called Lost to Nature, a raft of crafting mods to make sure you can create your own clothing, shoes, and other survival necessities, and if that wasn't making things easy enough, I've gone ahead and collected some of my preferred sandbox settings to make starting your wilderness survival playthrough as easy as possible. Right now you're seeing a collection of moving images that are designed to allow you to walk through each and every step of the sandbox options and ensure they are set up just the way I like to run them, and how we tend to run things on our multiplayer server. If you'd like to come back to this segment of the video when you're getting started with a run, this section will also be timestamped so you can find your way back here easily. Remember, the idea of a wilderness survival run isn't just for the zombies themselves to be a threat, but for nature itself to be your enemy too. As such, the zombie numbers might not be quite as high as you're used to, but believe me, you're going to be thankful for it since you'll have to craft pretty much every weapon you use. You can always crank up the zombie numbers if you feel like things are a bit too easy for you, or you can drop them down if you're struggling. These settings are just meant as a guide, you don't have to strictly stick to them. Finally, I'd just like to give a couple of recommendations on how you build your character for this kind of run. Trades and occupations are going to have a much larger impact on how your experience with a wilderness survival playthrough actually is, because unlike unlike a vanilla setup where these traits are ultimately just meant to support your favorite way to play or your favorite crafting skills, in this scenario, it could quite literally be the reason your character lives or dies. Without a doubt, the most important skill in this setup to me is foraging. It's going to allow you to find a whole bunch of the items you need for survival and crafting, whether that's setting down your first campfire or making the tools you need. With that in mind, the best occupation choice will always be park ranger in my mind. Those 2 extra foraging levels are going to be invaluable in the early stages, and you get an extra level of carpentry as well, which will at least allow you to place wooden floors and get started on your shelter right away. From here, you can cut down trees and saw logs until level 2 carpentry if you'd like, so that you can get some walls up, but with how easy it will be for your crafted axe to break during these activities, I'd instead recommend taking the trait handy as well, which takes you to level 2 carpentry with this build, and you'll be able to skip that part of the XP grind entirely. As a bonus, you'll also gain a level in maintenance, which will make your crafted weapons and tools a little bit more durable. As for your other traits, anything that increases foraging skill is a great option, but we're already 12 points in the red here. Instead, I'd recommend fast learner. Keep in mind that we're going to be almost entirely without books for XP boosts, so having built-in XP gains will be a huge help and make the entire experience a bit less tedious. As for negative traits to offset the positives, I usually take illiterate, again on account of there being almost no books available, slow healer, weak stomach, and Sunday driver. These traits should have fairly minimal effects on your gameplay and allow you to take those 2 very important positive traits. If you want to add some more positives or maybe remove illiterate just in case you find a book on a zombie or in a ruined house, then negative traits like claustrophobic, conspicuous, and unlucky are all potential replacements that won't affect you quite as much as in a vanilla playthrough. Okay, so I think that's just about everything that I wanted to talk about in this video with regards to wilderness survival in Project Zomboid, but hopefully this has gone some way to getting you looking forward to it as much as I am. I know I'm a big advocate for this method of play, I always have been, but I really do think that Build 42 is going to make this so much more accessible, more functional, and much more in depth than it used to be. As a final thing before I go, I know I've already given you guys the mod pack that I like to run for this setup in single player, but if you'd like to give this experience a try around some other incredibly welcoming players, form your own groups, trade with them, or just be able to ask some questions to people that have played this setup before, we'll be running Lost to Nature and the Wilderness Survival theme on our whitelisted Patreon server this month, starting Saturday the 26th of April, the very moment this video goes live on YouTube. So you'll be able to get in on day 1 for the best experience possible. My Patreon is linked down in the description. It's £3 a month, which we use to pay for hosting costs, commission mods, and of course modded maps, just like we did with Lost to Nature. From there, just follow the instructions in my pinned post on Patreon to get started on the server. Special thank you, of course, to my 300 existing Patreon subscribers that continue to support me and the server month on month. You guys are fantastic, and I couldn't do this without you. All the best, guys, and I will catch you all in the next one.